Hi, everyone. This is Cindy.
Hi, everyone. This is Jana.
Hi. Welcome to Close Encounters, our episode 6. Today, we have a really, a very important topic that we wanted to talk about. It's artists and artist managers. This is the crust of our industry. That relationship is really important. And it has certainly shifted for a lot of artists and artist managers over the course of the pandemic. And we're going to really just have a open conversation to talk about that and what might some of the possibilities be. So today we are joined by two very special guests, Yeelin all the way from Singapore, and then Square, the furthest away, all the way from New Zealand. He's currently at 2 a.m. in the morning. So my God, thank you both for joining us. And I'm going to open the floor to you guys just to briefly introduce yourself. Why don't we start with Square? I'm basing again on like the little squares in front of our monitors.
Sure. Kia ora koutou, apa khabar, tajiaho. My name is Square. I'm currently based in Auckland, New Zealand. I'm originally from Malaysia. I work as an arts manager / artist manager, as well as a creative producer. We run a small firm based in Auckland called Square Sums & Co. And I suppose we have a particular focus on storytellers, and in particular storytellers who have interest to work in cross-cultural or cross-genre or cross whatever spaces. That sort of stuff excites me. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Square.
Okay, is that me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm everybody. I'm Yeelin. I'm currently in Singapore. I am a solution-focused coach right now. I also do events management consultancy, and I'm also an artist agent right now. Previously, of course, I've worked in Shanghai for the last 10 years, and Hong Kong. We do events, production, creative events for brands and for celebrities and artists from all over the world, but mostly in Asia. And previous that, I used to do theater production, album production in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and concert production in Japan and in Asia itself. Yeah. So that's how I know Cindy. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Yeelin. Well, I think, the idea of, it's like this magical word, right? When you want to be in this business, the artist has this, idea that I must have a manager and I must have an agent. And these are two such synonymous terms that kind of means a little bit differently, I think, from region to region and country to country. And, and Jana can also speak to Germany and to Europe, but where I come from in North America, specifically in the US, as an artist, when you start out, once you get to a certain level of notoriety or people start to notice you, they want to seek out a manager. And then you get to a point where maybe you're ready to go out on a tour, or you wanted to have concerts and gigs, and that's where you find an agent to come in. But then there's also companies that do both, and I think it's important for us to kind of just, clarify that a little bit, because it does mean different things. And then I think, like I said in the beginning, is, those relationships are starting to shift, and I think it's going to continue to shift as we move out of COVID and as everyone has been accessing and communicating with each other online, through screen time and through virtual platforms, so on and so forth. And I think it would be so interesting to see how our industry, whether it's the commercial side or the performing arts side, is going to move forward with those relationships. So, you know, just to start the prompt, I mean, you know, maybe Jana, you can jump into, you know, starting like going into Europe. Like, what does those terms mean to you guys?
Well, actually, I think in Europe, the biggest difference is it's not so common to have artist managers for performing arts performers. Like, unless you're like a superstar, a ballerina or musician or whatsoever, like the common, well, not common, but you know, the normal performing arts people, they don't have managers in that way. They do organize themselves. It's a thing. It's a money thing, simply because they cannot afford anyone to take care of their business stuff or business side of everything. And also, I think, yeah, actually, I think that's one. And it's not, you know, there's not a platform that big. I mean, for music, people from the music business, it's completely different.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting because from my experience being a dancer before and seeing how dancers, especially because that's where I come from, deal with contracts and timing and traveling. I mean, some are really good at it, but some are absolutely lost. I mean, for me, I was always like, oh my God, you would be so much better in your job. You would work much more. You would be better if you would have someone to take care of that part of your professional life. It's just not common. So, but that's, you know, that's why I mean, what Cindy said, I'm totally interested to hear your side of what defines an arts manager? Like, what's the definition? So what's the job actually?
So
Yeah.
over here in New Zealand, artist management is, I suppose, quite rare as well, and more commonly found within the music industry. So typically, if you say you're an artist manager, they assume almost that you work in the music industry, that you're a music manager. Similarly to what Jana is talking about, we don't necessarily have a lot of managers or management for performing artists, and certainly we don't really have sort of performing artists at the level of scale necessarily that Jana and Yeelin, you would have been used to working with, partly because geographically we're so far away and our market's quite small. I suppose the thing about what I do is it's pretty unusual probably within the New Zealand marketplace in that you know, I do focus on performing arts because I have a creative producing background. A lot of kind of our core business activity is touring and live work, and so you know we come from that approach. And often when I sit with artists, you know, to ask them why are they looking for management, for instance, you know, half the time a very typical answer is because, you know, they hate admin or they just can't deal with all these things.
Yeah.
And too often, you know, I have to gently remind them that what they're describing is not necessarily management, but more assistance.
Yes.
You know, and to some extent, a lot of that is functional. You know, if you have the resources for it, if you have the money for it, you can throw the money at the problems, and then that would resolve it. Because our background is really more kind of artistic and market development, while we do support the artists from a business administration perspective, that doesn't necessarily form sort of the core offering of what we do for our artists. So, you know, for instance, I wouldn't necessarily do the bookkeeping or the accounting for my artists because I'm not an accountant, I'm a lawyer. You know, I'd rather work with a specialist or an expert to provide those services. So I guess if I were to kind of sum up the profession over here, it doesn't really exist as far as the performing arts is concerned. It's an area that I think there's lots of potential for growth over here, not just in New Zealand, but Australia. We certainly have a lot of artists who punch well above their weight class. For instance, I manage one of our key clients is the Modern Māori Quartet, which is a Māori show band. think sort of the Rat Pack meets the All Blacks meets cabaret storytelling, you know, that kind of paints a picture of who we are and what we do. And culturally, there's a lot of kind of uniqueness to the property. And so we've been really fortunate to be able to tour quite extensively internationally over the last 5 or 6 years. Beyond the Modern Māori Quartet, I also manage Tofinga Fepuliai, who is arguably the world's most kind of recognizable Samoan entertainer or stand-up comedian. He used to be one half of the Laughing Samoans, and again also had a very sort of illustrious international career for about 15 years. I also managed a young 22-year-old singer-songwriter called Jana Posth, who is very, very exciting. He's just recently signed to a US label. We're really excited to see what he potentially could do in the near future. So yeah, so that's a little bit about kind of what I do over here.
Yeelin, you want to kind of give us an overview of sort of the Asian territories, because it is really different.
Yeah, I think, you know, well, if we start from Singapore, then it used to be, you know, it's still a very small market, but I think we're pretty developed in that way. I think the theater scene is very pretty active. We have a lot of theater groups going on and all that. So we do have, but we have a lot of independent theater practitioners, right? Because generally, you know, like Jana was saying, unless you're some super famous actors, theater actors, you might have a management. But because the industry is so small, our theater actors are also TV actors or vice versa. And so slowly we have a management, there are management companies in Singapore sprouting out the past many years already, who are managing these people, right? And the reason why they go into management also because they it's the connection, right? They feel they need to belong to the same like-minded people, and you know, like Square, they don't want to look at contracts, they don't know how to negotiate, they think somebody is trying to get them. And also I think it's very respectable in Singapore. You know, it's again the class thing. I have a manager. So, but what really does the manager do? Maybe sometimes it's contacts, sometimes it's just to follow and like, hey, you know, I have a manager, right? Well, I'm not trying to stereotype. I'm sure some people will disagree with me, but generally, I think, yeah, you know, and of course, I think it is true. You need to be professional. I think for any artist to be professional, I seriously think you need to have a manager. I mean, that's how when I used to work with an artist, which is what happened to be my first boss, Dick Lee, I remember he was discovered in Japan at a very later stage, and they only want to talk to his manager. They're not interested to talk to the artist. They feel that it's respectable and only professional to talk to the manager, because the manager here is responsible for grooming him, shaping his career, shaping his path forward, you know. In here, our music industry, of course, everybody wants to be a singer, right? And of course, English speaking is still not so well developed, but it has slowly. So we do have good English albums, but my era, it was going to Taiwan. If you can make it in Taiwan, you know, and there you made it, and you can come back to Singapore. So that's why you see a lot of our export, like Tanya, Sun Yanzi, you know, Kip Chan, you know, and they're there. And then they come back and like JJ now, you know, and you got to like kind of make it there, then okay. But now it's like you have to make it in China, right? If you're not in that career. In China, it's a little bit different. It's very new, right? This sudden boom, 10 years, suddenly you have celebrities, you have influencers, you have Wang Hong, you have KOLs, they all have management companies, you know, and
that's so interesting.
It can be a nightmare dealing with the management companies because they are not exactly, well, I'm probably going to offend some people, but generally they're not so professional, right? So they create hell for us who are producing the events. But I think it's just this thing, right? And they also become agent as well, because it is so big that it can't the market. So I want a piece of the business. So they want to be artist manager, but they at the same time they'll tell you, but by the way, if you want someone this, who, I can get it for you too. So so that's how China works, right? No rules, plenty of rules, but no rules.
Yeah. I have a question.
I want in Hong Kong. Yeah, sorry, Jana.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. But Hong Kong is very established in that way. They have proper artist management. They have concert producers, and they work very closely. And really, you craft the growth of the artist.
Yeah.
I have a short question, because there's one thing. No. Sorry. I mean, that is one thing that you both mentioned, which is that an artist, I'm talking about any kind of artist, no matter which level, needs a manager, or it requires a manager, because they don't like to do admin stuff. They're not good at contracting and negotiating and so on. So my question is, do you think they really don't know how to do it, or because that's my experience without naming anyone, that they feel like once they do read a contract properly, or they do organize their calendar, it takes away a bit of them being an artist. An artist is like all over the place, You're an artist and you cannot be an admin person and an artist. And I do know, I think Gerhard Richter, this famous painter, he's a complete control freak. So that's what I heard. So he's doing both. So my question is a good manager someone who takes over completely, says, okay, you're an artist and I'm doing all the admin stuff? Or is a good manager someone who does push the artist a little bit to be a bit more organized in terms of show up in time, read your contract because it's your contract, blah, blah, all that stuff? Or maybe it's something I didn't mention. So what is a good manager? What defines a good manager?
Well, I mean, for me, I don't, and I want to talk about this later too, because it's like, for how I train my artists is that, I'm very transparent. So when I'm sending them, monthly statements or whatever, or any kind of payment, I clarify very clearly what each of these payments are for, what are the deductions, and so on and so forth. And I tell them, you've got to read this very carefully. And then, also, I have a current artist right now who, a pop artist, and she's never read her publishing royalty, payments. And I'm like, that is not acceptable. I told her, I said, I am going to sort this out for you, and you're going to sit there and I'm going to train you how to read it. Because at the end of the day, I think it's also learning. I do think that they have to take up some of these responsibilities. I don't need you to sit there reading every line for line contract, or every single line item on that financial statement. But at the same time, you need to be aware of your money, because that's your money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's their life.
It's your life.
Yeah. But I think, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, Yeelin. I was just about to say, as a producer, we have a belief that even if you never have to do the task, you should at least understand what it is. Because if you don't have at the very least some level of knowledge, how do you ask questions, or how do you govern, or check on the situation? And so, and then I think, Jana, to answer your question, I don't know if there's a sort of general kind of description of what an artist would naturally do or not do within sort of the business administration realm, but we definitely see that most of the artists that we work with prefer not to. I think that's putting it very gently. They would prefer not to, and not necessarily because they not just lack the skill sets and the expertise, but it could also be a matter of confidence or experience. And then furthermore, I see this in particular with some of our creatives, where the switch between being an artist, that creative mode, and having to put on the business hat proverbially, takes quite a toll on them.
Yeah.
You know, because of kind of our practice, where we do try really hard to make sure that our artists upskill in terms of their knowledge base, etc., etc. Often, you know, we're asking them to do certain things as part of their career, you know, to work with us to help them, you know, improve on their career. So I think my response to that question is, I consider the relationship between an artist and a manager to be one that is more reflexive than anything else. I think it has to be reflexive, because I don't ever want to be in a situation as a manager where I decide what the artist is going to do. It has always got to be artist-led. My job is to paint the picture, to help paint the picture. My job is to put the cards on the table. My job is to make sure that the artist is safe in terms of what he or she does. And, you know, the more fundamental things, like, you know, turning up on time and blah blah blah, that's really not even a manager's role. I think it's more that, you know, there's a certain level of professionalism that you kind of need to expect of an artist, you know, because at the end of the day, if I'm having to run around and chase an artist for appearances or whatever it is, then that's really, I've become the EA. What, you know, that's not my job. So
yeah, just to add on to Square, you know, basically I think we filter some complexity of the matter, whether it's the project itself, the creative issue itself, or is it the lawyer's contract issue itself, or whatever issue we encounter. I think we are there to filter out a little bit and paint a easier picture for them to understand. But I do agree with Cindy. I think it's very important for the artist to understand, at least you know, make a little bit of effort. And I do see the growth sometimes when you see an artist who really treasure himself or herself and respect his own art. They do make a point to learn and to know better. So they will want to read the contract. They have more questions. You know, sometimes you may think then that's a sign of being difficult, but actually not. I think they were just trying to understand, and because of that, they will put on requests, and they, you know, and I think that's a good relationship. Yeah.
Maybe an appropriate analogy could be to describe the artist management sort of relationship as a driver and a navigator, or a sea captain and a navigator. The reason why I think it needs to be reflexive is because one cannot really do one's job without the other. And the reality is, you know, you would almost assume that the artist would be the driver or the captain of the ship, whereas the manager is the navigator. But I think often you might find that those roles are interchangeable, and the reality is both parties need to be equally skilled, equally passionate about the business activity or the artistic activity, and you know, I suppose that's kind of a fundamental way of how we approach working with our artists. There'll be moments where, as management, I cannot move forward unless the artist is being, you know, has been able to forge their path artistically or creatively. You know, it is always about checking in with each other, making sure that there's, you know, really open and transparent communications, as you said, Cindy. I think that's really fundamental.
And to stretch and challenge each other, you know. So we kind of help each other to grow. Well, that's it, right? Kind of.
It's funny you should say that, because I say that a lot to some of our younger kind of artists. we're interested to manage, or we've got our eye on, but when then, you know, they are not quite ready. We're not quite ready for them either, you know. So I often say to them, my job here is to provoke. My job here is to challenge. You know, if we have a meeting and you don't walk away feeling hopefully a little bit more perplexed or confused than you did at the start of our conversation, then I probably didn't do a really good job with you, you know.
So other than that, right, I think we also hope that we can give the artists, whether we met somehow able to spot them somewhere out there singing a lot or whatever, and we take them under our care, so-called, you know, like we were saying earlier, they're like our kids, right? We don't want, we need them to fall sometimes, but there's a mattress somewhere waiting for them, and they don't bleed to, you know. But the whole idea, I think, is for us to, I think at the beginning of my career, when I was doing artist management, of course, eventually there was a burnout, you know, mentally and physically stressed out, because there's just so much we take on, and we feel that we are taking on their lives, you know, we're living their lives. So, and like we are saying, we talk to them more, we see them more, we see them cry, we see them happy, we see them at their worst moment and the happiest moments. We were right beside them. So it kind of drained me. But before that, we really is about, I think now it's all about, now that I'm older, you know, and been to both sides, you know, being the artist management and the event side, I think it's not only just to challenge them, but I think we are here to, managers are here to give the artists confidence, clarity, you know, and a sense of hope, you know, and
So,
especially with this situation right now, I think that's more important for that to kind of co-relate.
I think
that would be my question, picking that up, because I mean, you just said the three words: confidence, hope, and clarity. And I think the past 12 months, actually it was even longer. I mean, it's July, 15 months almost. Oh my God. Can you imagine? Right? I mean, we all would have known this a year ago. Thank God we didn't. So, I mean, that I think for everyone, but especially also as an artist, being used to going out there, traveling, performing on stage, not in front of cameras or a computer. I think there is and I mean, just, you know, very understandably, it's like there probably is a huge lack of all these three things you just mentioned. So didn't that kind of affect the job, you know, the job definition? So what changed within the last 12 months? I mean, I don't want to use that word, but I will say it because everyone will, you know, like, as a manager, you're also always like a little bit of a therapist, no? Like, you're working very close with a human being who's very sensitive to a lot of things because they're artists. So that is, I think that past year was very challenging in looking at that part of the job.
Yeah. I mean, certainly for me, you know, and I've said this even before, is that I think I was toward, I instead of, you know, trying to fall into this trap of, okay, I think again, because as managers, we spend so much time, in a way, we think of ourselves as the adult and the kids kind of situation. And so when you're in a situation like this, you know, my mind immediately turns to, well, let's troubleshoot, you know, how do we solve the problem now existing? And immediately it's thinking about, well, I mean, there's no performances already, you know, when this whole pandemic hit, first week of March, before the rest of the world had shut down, because Asia had already shut down. You know, I started writing I drafted an email to all of my artists, and I said, I'm so sorry, this is, you know, this is coming, this has already happened in Asia, and it's moving westward to the rest of the world, and I do not anticipate any performances for the next 9 to 12 months. And be prepared, and that we're making best effort to move everyone out of the situation, and that you can talk to me at any time. And but that was my thing. I felt like that was my responsibility as an agent and as a manager to my artists, that I have to do this. You know, it's like it's how do you parent your children, right? There's so many different styles, and I think managing is the same thing. And I know that some managers may decide not to over highlight or you know, microscopically like highlight this this situation. But to me, I feel that from a responsibility perspective, I do need to heighten the situation, because it is, I do foresee it, and I think it's not to over exaggerate, but I think it's about, again, if it's, the word is expectations, and managing everyone's expectations. And for me, I think it's just having Asian parents. They're like, we always anticipate the worst. Like you have to prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I felt was the responsible way to do. And then from there, it's just thinking of, well, what else can I do to help my artists stay creative? Because they're not the only one. And also telling them that this is not only you guys, the whole entire industry in the world is coming to has come to a halting stop.
Yeah. I think,
sorry, Yeelin, you go.
No, you go ahead.
I was sorry, I didn't mean to.
We're good.
I was going to say that there's so many tricky and complex issues here to navigate, because that nexus between an artist and a manager is, for want of a better word, an intimate one.
Very.
Often, we can be spending more time, I joke about this, but half the time I talk to some of my artists more than my own wife or my family, and the reality is, I suppose it's a choice, different management styles. Our preferred approach is holistic, in that, as Jana, you rightly point out, there is an element of arts therapy included in the work, whether you like it or not. I think it's necessary, because the artist is not just a utility, it's not just a product. Hopefully the artist is generating lots of good utility and product, but at the end of the day, the mental, spiritual, cultural, creative health of an artist, all those elements need to be well aligned in order for there to be real substantial progress. Sometimes luck plays a big part, and you never know, you might hit something really viral or some such, and then all of a sudden things accelerate really quickly. Or conversely, you have a global pandemic and everything grinds to a halt. We were touring extensively until pretty much, as you said, first week of March, and then all of a sudden we had to, like you, work with our artists to help them realize the need to pivot and be hyperlocal, and also be prepared for this onset of lack of work, for one, lack of business revenue. It actually came down to the point where we just needed to make sure that everybody had money for rent and money, food on the table, and that mentally they had support. Those were dark times. The first COVID lockdown over here, mental health was a massive issue. It continues to be a massive issue. We in New Zealand are pretty lucky in that we have had the ability to have live performance and touring for a fair while. Most of our shows that go on in New Zealand are essentially the largest shows in the world at the moment, because no one else is doing a show. And we're spoilt in that respect. And I guess our artists understand that is quite unusual. But the reality is, even though they might still have touring activity or business activity at the moment, it is a far cry from what we had before.
Right.
And so, to be able to kind of make sure that the artist is healthy, not just from an artistic perspective, is really important. And I guess, to add to sort of clarity and hope, Yeelin, what you were talking about, for me, I suppose one of the core contributions a manager could do for an artist is insight, and that comes, that includes foresight and hindsight and all sorts of different things, but that thing about insight is really, really key and important. In my own practice, I tend to prefer to work intuitively as much as possible. So, when I'm talking to an artist, obviously I've got, I guess, a management hat on, but very much as much as possible, I try to connect empathically with my artist so that I can also understand what he or she might be going through, because all of that will impact things. And there's a funny thing because, I struggle, if I'm being honest, I struggle with the distinctions of being an agent and a manager. Mostly because over here, it's quite a fused kind of profession, if you like, or a fused role. The sort of where I've got to in terms of my thinking about it is that an artist may not be as invested in an agent may not be as invested in an artist as a manager might. And it could also be the difference between having a more relational as opposed to a more transactional sort of approach with the artist. I'm really curious to know, what thoughts there might be about, what actually sets an agent and a manager apart, because it's confusing.
I think in Asia, I think for Asia, maybe I can say that for, some artists have open their own artist management company.
Right.
So they kind of self-manage with a team, right? Because they could manage, they just need assistance to do all the necessary, but they are the brains behind. So then they will need agents to maybe even book them for concert tours, for mainly for concert tours, I think, in Asia here, or for events or things that they, because sometimes they need agents, and sometimes in Asia the PR agency are like your agents, because they are the who helps the events or the brands to say, oh, I think this so and so and so should be able to come to this event, and so they become kind of like a mini agent, and they work with the management companies. So the difference probably, agent do not own the artist. You're not responsible for grooming and owning, and agent is basically free to work and talk to anybody, and it's like a go-between.
So like a middle person or
middleman.
You could say that. Middleman.
It's
Well,
like
that's what I do sometimes, right? So because I have relationship with artist management, and I have relationship with maybe the brands or the event agency, and that's where we are able to then put two together. And sometimes they approach me. The difference is because I understand, I speak both their language, and so there is a certain amount of trust to say, we don't want to deal with artist management because they have too many requests, and it's one whole big chunk, sometimes, right? You think it's the event, but then in the end they say this artist or the artists are going to take up a lot of their time. So the agent comes in to then, like an artist manager, and an accounts director, you filter for both sides,
I might have mentioned this yesterday when we had a pre-conversation, but generally speaking, kind of the aim when I'm working with an artist is not necessarily just to manage the artist, but I ultimately want to manage the artist's managers and agents. For me, that's where I think my value is, to be able to help put together a team, as Cindy, you mentioned, it's kind of like stretching out those tentacles so that you have different branches and different service providers, for want of a better word, having a booking agent or a publisher, for instance, or whatever it is. And I suppose the goal is to remain always that most trusted person, by the artist, consulting, of course, with all the different advisors and all the different suppliers and partners that you might forge over time. But ultimately, that's the sort of approach that I I wanted to take with my artists because one, we can't do everything. I certainly don't have the knowledge base for everything, you know, if and often when we sort of move into a new market or we move into a new level of working, for instance, you know, we need support. Even though I do have a background in law, you know, I would not necessarily have, you know, the in-depth experience to negotiate a multi-album deal, you know, with a major label, for instance, as, you know, my entertainment lawyer might have. And so it's an ability to go, okay, my job at the end of the day, hopefully, is to help you action some stuff, but mostly to ask questions.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I think it's, oh, sorry, Cindy.
No, I was going to say that, you know, because I was kind of trained in the traditional agency management model in the United States, where I worked for agencies that both had a management division and the booking division, but it's very clear. It's very clear in the United States, right? It's the roles are so clear, cut and dry. But, you know, because of the relationship, like, you know, some reminded me, and it's true, like, for example, in the state of California, you cannot be a management company and an agency company at the same time. Like that legally, those two cannot coexist. But in my mind, I don't really see a conflict. But I think legally, because they say, well, you cannot take commission and make money from your artists from both the performances you book and all the work that you're doing to manage them.
Right.
But, you know, that's just the California law. But to me, because I came from the recording industry of how we treat artists, you know, more in a management role, I always feel like that kind of management role and that perspective and the relationship is very helpful as an agent. You know, I know tons of agents in the industry in the United States who probably have never really met the artist. They've only spoken to the artist manager, even within the company, right? They may have met them once at the backstage, or most of them rarely ever go out on tour with them, because the management, the agent's responsibility is to work with their other agents to route the proper touring schedule, and then making sure the contract is done, and then that's it. And then when the tour is over, or when the date of each of these performances are over, they're responsible for making sure that the payment comes in, and then you're off to the next artist, right? So I take a much different approach. Like for me, I like to at least go out on the road of the tour with the artist or the project at least once, because for me, I don't think I could speak professionally or very well about a project without actually seeing the goal, you know, how that production goes from A to Z. Because it's also, for me, it's an efficiency issue. If I look at only the tech writer, visually doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like if I don't see it from A to Z, I at least can observe all the little minor details that may not be written in the tech writer. So to me, that's important. So this is why, even when I started my own company, it's not some sort of agency or management. You know, my approach is kind of even before the pandemic, I just think that what we had in the United States, and I'm only specifically talking about the United States, it's a model that I think is already outdated and kind of archaic, which also inspired our conversation, you know, today that we're having right now. And just looking at, you know, Asia has such a different model. You're creating also a slightly different model in New Zealand. And, you know, I mean, Jana, you know, throwing it back to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because I really like what you just said, and also I'm trying to connect the dots, because it's actually comes down to a personal experience. Like it's much like, you know, I'm also working as a creative producer. If someone asks me to promote their piece of art, like, you know, dance piece or theater piece and music piece, I have to see it, and I also have to like it. I cannot go out there and be convincing, saying, yes, this is a fantastic performance. With something I'm not really, you know, and it doesn't matter if it's one person, if it's a whole production, if it's just a stupid pen, you know, how can I sell something But the personal experience, and also what you said earlier with the mental health, I think now, going back to the pandemic, we're actually heading into a new period, which is the post-pandemic. Well, hopefully, knocking on wood. And what I feel like, and this refers to everyone, to the artist, to the manager, to everyone, is we're still in a tunnel. So right now, we are still, it's like, when you drive through a tunnel, you do, like, I'm scared of tunnels. I don't like this kind of, narrow space. It's not for me. So what I do is like, I focus to the end, and then I see the light, and that becomes bigger. And then I exit the tunnel. But the moment I get out, I really feel shitty. That's the moment I feel shitty, because before I'm actually concentrated. And I feel a little bit, it's like what we do now. We are concentrating on getting through this. Everyone, the artist, we do. Yeah. So by the time, like now we're kind of, it looks like we're heading towards the end. And I feel like I can let loose. But letting loose is not be really like, yay, I'm happy. It's actually, now I start feeling all the fear and anger. And I had a friend here yesterday, and I was like, what the fuck happened? The last 12 months. Really? And I feel like I know I've been there and I experienced it, but I didn't feel anything really. And now wait for the artists, wait for everyone to feel actually what happened. And I think that will add, we are heading into a new period now. And I'm really curious, what does that do to the artist, the manager, the agent, the manager, to all of us? Does that create a new post-pandemic situation, or I don't know. Probably there is no answer really, but
I think generally, I think all artists are eager to get back. Age, right? Yeah, but I think some artists during the crazy period, I think some of them are blessed to be able to say, well, I can pause and rest and do my creative, whatever it is, be it do the painting, the singer decided to do painting, or the painter decided to do the music or whatever. I think those are the lucky ones. Those who are quite unlucky, where, especially in the theater, where they generally it's very hard-earned money, and they rely the theaters to be open. I know for some here in Singapore, then they have no hosting job, they cannot act on stage, and what can they do? Some have to do something else completely. I know a particular actress, wonderful actress here in Singapore. She had to then think differently and wipe up her mom's famous chili thing, and she made chili. And the theater community supported her, and that was good. So you still have that community, it's just that you couldn't perform. Some, of course, gone into online, because then, of course, in China, every actors had to pause, and they all turned into become online celebrities, selling products and things like that. I guess it depends on where you are. Some of us are more blessed, and could do that. And China is back already, and everybody is attending events and performing. I know some took time to write music, so that's where I think that's where the manager's role comes in, where we could then work together. Like Cindy, you think, what's next? How can we do it? What can we do differently, and how can we do better? So that relationship is kind of important in times like this. We need somebody who knows us, right? That's where kids runs back home and say,
I know
how so how and that's where we come in and see the best.
Can we relate to sort of the anxiety that Jana, you're talking about? when we all went into lockdown, I think there was an assumption that that would be the best gift for creatives, that all creatives around the world would just do nothing but create. That could not be further from the truth.
No, yeah.
The reality was that you became concerned about putting literally the next meal on the table. There's housing issues, there's all sorts of different issues, and as an environment, it's not particularly conducive. There is truth that for a lot of our creative community here, both artistic and management, there was all of a sudden the ability to take a brief moment of reprieve, to be introspective, to be reflective. And I think, to be fair, I think even for us, we've benefited from that because our national and government response to the pandemic has been pretty choice. It's been pretty strong. And it's given us opportunity to really deconstruct and then reconstruct sort of our own practices, to be able to really interrogate sort of what some of our core beliefs, to understand what things should or could be going into the future. I think the question is absolutely right. We as management should now be taking a view, looking ahead to understand what the future might hold. Except if we think as management that we can actually answer that question, I think all the fool, we're literally being quite foolish about it, because COVID proved a number of things, right? One, everybody can work from home. Well, not everybody, but most people can work from home. And that, if anything, consumption of creative arts increased, not decreased, counterintuitively. And for me, I think the biggest lesson that I took out of the whole COVID lockdown is that we don't know anything.
I just have to jump on that really quickly. I'm a complete control freak. I am. I admit, agree, whatever. But that's the one, I totally agree, because that's the one thing I learned. I can't control shit. And, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I just read that yesterday. That's why I'm sorry, because I just read this yesterday that someone said in the newspaper saying, you get, when you have a job interview, they always ask you this question: where do you see yourself in 2 years?
In 2 years, I know.
Yeah, and then he said, everyone 2 years ago, they got that wrong.
I know.
Because no one would have said.
I hate those questions.
These things, COVID proved that strategic plans are essentially pointless.
Yes, and you know what? It's fine. That's, for me, it's the biggest. I'm fine. I always thought, oh my God, if I can't control everything, I'll be lost, and I'll be sitting, I don't know, whatever, in my kitchen crying in the corner. But I'm totally fine. And that, for me, is one of the biggest surprise, that not having control and I can live and I can still do my work, maybe even better, because there's a sort of creativity we all have to, come up with, that is new, and it's okay not to control everything and to know what's happening. And that, for me, is absolutely one of the biggest things I'll take out of this, to be honest.
Yeah, but surprised, I totally agree with you. We are all surprised how we manage and how
what seriously,
strength or a totally different mindset. We would never thought that it's possible, but we kind of did it, and we're still, we're not, we're still okay. I walked through the streets here yesterday, and I remember this city was dead. It was like dead for months. There was no one sitting outside. There was and I walked through, there are a lot of restaurants and cafes here, and I saw the people sitting and chatting, watching soccer, and I was like, how did we even manage to survive not having this for a week? And it took us months. It was closed for 6 months straight. And that just stopped 2-3 weeks ago. And already I'm like, really? How did we manage? And we not just managed, we're fine. We're okay.
yes, I had my moments, and I will still have some moments once in a while, but I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yes. So, you know, I was, I just, something popped up, you know, because of, you were saying nobody, you know, everything was shut. And in Singapore, what was surprising that 3 different theater groups, the artistic director of the 3 different theater groups got together and did a online play.
It was, are you talking about Gora's piece? And
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
it was so
Ooh.
funny.
And
It was so
who
funny.
would have thought of that?
Yes,
You know,
yes,
and people paid to do it, and it was so popular that when the economy reopened for a while, they did it as a play on stage. So sometimes, you know, we are, you know, so I think
there is, you know,
maybe we
there's
are creative, you know, they were so creative that I think it's just the initial shock, like, oh my God, how could this possibly?
it is. Yeah. Because actually, you know, I truly believe that crisis always comes with chance. Every crisis, no matter what. And a lot of people, you know, it's also maybe a mental thing, mental health. You know, some people do always focus on, they walk into a room and they see everything that is not working, or everything that is too dark or too whatever. And I think if you're able to see the chance in this crisis, and even not only today but beyond, you know, I mean, Steve Jobs saw something he made a huge empire out of. And I mean, you know, these are the people who kind of have the ability to, and that was not even a crisis he came from.
Yeah,
I mean, he came from a time where there was no iPhone, you know, and now there is an iPhone and everyone has it. But I think that's the thing. This crisis bears so many chances and so much to look at, which is not depressing and not even only a solution, which is actually something that has its, you know, starts now. And people will, I don't know, hopefully in 50 years or 150 years will say, oh, and remember, this was invented during that pandemic in 2019-21. But it will not be a solution. It will be something we came up with because maybe we had the time, or maybe we had the necessity, or maybe we just started focusing on different things, you know?
Right.
And that's, I think, is really great.
Yeah. No, but Square, you know, it's like, literally, I think people were just performing, or you know, they couldn't perform, they became trainers or teachers. Who would have thought you could do ballet online and
in my kitchen? I would have thought, I would have never seen myself doing ballet in my kitchen, and I did. And I was like, look at this, I have a ballet studio at home.
Right?
Why do I pay? Why do I even care going somewhere?
Yeah, you know, and then like, I mean, I think this is the, you know, this is, again, we had all these conversations on the mental health because that is almost like the thread through every of our conversations. And even when it comes to the idea of artists and artist managers, I think we also have to look, it's a time to look inwards, right? And it's a time to look at this. It could be it's mentally your choice to make this an opportunity, or to think of this as a continued crisis and that you could not survive. But, you know, you've already, like between Yeelin and Square, you've already set examples of stuff that has been happening, you know, even pre-pandemic and during pandemic, that even maybe the people in the United States have not thought about. And I think, again, this is why we're having these chats, is to give people, you know, a different idea that they can maybe take home and say, we could implement this. But then you yourself, whether you're an artist or you're artist manager or an agent, have to be ready to think, you know, and that's the thing. You need to be ready.
Thank you for saying that, because I think, you know, when we all went through lockdown, I think people often said, you know, resilience is the most important kind of aspect of what we need to now include or make sure is integral to our practices.
Yes.
And that is absolutely true. But headed towards that light at the end of the tunnel, Jana, as you put it, readiness is actually the biggest asset for any artist at the
Yes.
moment.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, strategic plans, a lot of them just fell out the window because nobody could do anything about it. But the reality is there's a lot of value still in having some sort of a strategic approach to things. And so for me, what that means is my job now is to ensure that my artists, as much as possible, will be ready for a post-pandemic market or a post-pandemic scenario.
Yes.
When that post-pandemic scenario actually comes to fruition is still a matter of debate, because I think, again, I think collectively, we are all being lulled into a sense of security at the moment with the vaccinations and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
We have peers who, a friend of mine who's actually an epidemiologist, is peer reviewing papers out of Australia. And there's, conversation and academic sort of study suggesting that the impact of COVID-19, we initially all thought it was going to be 2 or 3 years if we were lucky. But the science is actually indicating that we're looking at more closer to a decade. And so the reality is, if we think that by this time next year, things will be peachy, forget about it.
Yeah.
It's not. I said to my artists from the very beginning, irrespective of what happens with our travel policies and our foreign policies, we're not touring internationally until probably the end of 21 at the earliest. At the earliest. At the moment, when New Zealand opened the bubble with Australia, obviously avalanche of interest. Everybody wants to go. We need to tour, we need to perform, we need to work, and that's absolutely right. But the global aviation industry has essentially imploded. There's no ability to de-risk. There's no ability to insure. There's no ability to anticipate what's going to happen. Like Sydney's going through a massive crisis at the moment. Northern Territories are going through a massive crisis. In New Zealand, even though we've had this really wonderful ability to have concerts, we had a 60,000 person audience concert in Auckland not too long ago. The reality is, in New Zealand, we can go from a state of happy-go-lucky, quite normal, no mask necessary, to lockdown in a matter of hours.
Yes.
So February 14th, Valentine's Day, Auckland went from level 1 to level 3 or 4, I can't remember, 3, yes, pretty much in a matter of 4 hours. In 4 hours, I had to figure out how I was going to get back from Auckland to Palmerston North, where the entire of my team was, because we moved the team the day before, and I had foolishly thought it would be the best thing to come back up to Auckland to celebrate my mum's 65th birthday, which is absolutely the right thing to do. Except, 2 hours into the celebration, our Prime Minister comes on telly and goes, Auckland's going to lockdown at 11:59 tonight. And so all of a sudden I'm like, great. Next thing I know, it's 8:30, I'm at the airport picking up quite possibly the last rental car available, and I'm barreling down the motorway, getting back down to Palmerston North, getting in at 4 in the morning. So Jana, what I wanted to say to you is the sensations and the feelings that you're experiencing is absolutely expected, and the best thing that we can do for ourselves and for our artists is actually just to be kind to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, that's what it is. And as much as it pains us and it's frustrating and it's anxiety inducing, the one thing that's really helped me sort of through this period is some advice from a friend who used to be a diplomat for South Africa. And in one of our conversations, he would say things like, when I was a diplomat and something happened, the first question I'd ask would be, did anyone die?
Yeah,
it's true.
Because if nobody did, that's fine. We can fix this. And the thing is, I thought it was quite funny. And then he went, no, you don't understand. I'm a South African diplomat. That question is a real question. Like, it's not just in jest. And so, you know, that kind of helped me gain some perspective in terms of what it is. You know, I agonized over the fact that we lost pretty much all our work, and our artists in turn lost all their pipeline, you know, in 48 hours or less, you know, at the start of lockdown. But then, you know, a good friend of ours, Natasha, who runs a wonderful orchestra and used to run a wonderful orchestra in London, you know, she's had players who have literally died because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think it is about readiness. Cindy, you're absolutely on the money there. And while, you know, we may not necessarily have those strategic plans in place, or, you know, have them remain in place, the reality is we have a lot to learn. And I think some of those core values are really important. Resilience, readiness, I don't know, resonance. For me, currency is a big thing at the moment, to my mind, because, you know, the responses, Yeelin, what you talked about, you know, the online platforms and having the play readings or the performances online, all of that is about maintaining currency and reach, you know. As creatives, we cannot help but create. It is in our DNA. It is the very essence of who we are and what we do. And like you said, Jana, you know, crisis comes opportunity, and there's and you're right. You know, we have actively choice to make, but at the same time, it's also okay if you don't make a choice.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I want to add onto that list is, you know, take it step by step. You know, take it day by day, because I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't plan, but as you said, I mean, me personally, I'm really happy I didn't know that I would still sit here not traveling a year ago, because like talking mental health, I think it's good for my mental health not to know, you know. So but I'm taking it step by step. And I remember like our counselor, she said there was a big crisis. I don't remember what it was. And then the journalist stood up, and this journalist said to her, so why aren't you furious about it? Why aren't you freaking out? I mean, this is everything shit. And she said, she was standing there, you know, she's very cool, and she was like, you know, if it would make a change, I would, but it doesn't make a change. If I stand here and get furious about it, I'm not going to make a change. So why? I mean, she's a scientist, you know, she's looking at things very practical. Right. She's not the most emotional person on that planet Earth. Well, not on the outside, on the inside, maybe, probably, hopefully. But I think that's the last thing I want to add on that list, because I totally agree. And I think taking it step by step and taking it more calm, you know, trying to just take it as it is will get us through this. And I agree. I think COVID is not going to go away next year or the year after. The only thing is, I very much hope that we have the control, that we have it under control as much as we, you know, so that we can travel, that we can watch performances and so on. And I think there is a chance for 2022. Let's see, but yeah.
So that's why it's important, I think, the relationship between the artist and the manager. Well, not necessarily you in a position of not able to get a manager yet or anything. I think the importance of having somebody like a buddy with you, that could share your fears, as well as just to talk all day and say, what can we do next if we cannot travel? I cannot be on stage. What can I do? And you know, and in conversation like this as well, where then we get sparked with new ideas, you know, we have a little pat and say, well, we are all right. We are actually more blessed than most people out there. So, you know, I think that's quite important at the end of the day, that having a relationship who understands your craft. For all the artists out there.
In terms of readiness, you know, I feel quite strongly that one of our responsibilities as artist management is to encourage our artists to kind of be at the forefront of making sure that they are themselves vaccinated, but also use their influence and ability to encourage others to do the same. You know, we know the state of the world, and the state of humanity, anti-vaxxers abound, etc., etc., etc. The reality is, it is about readiness, and to as a first starting step, that's probably as good as anything. And then to be able to kind of hone and distill your craft and repackage it or repurpose it in such a way that when the doors finally open up again, when the world opens up again, hopefully you can do something. I suppose something that means quite a lot to us in our practice is that our artists fundamentally are interested in doing good. I know it sounds really rah-rah, but my wife and I made a conscious decision just over a decade ago that when we decided to do this full-time again, that we would essentially want to, I suppose, do work that would create social good.
Yeah.
And for me, the meaning of that is extensive. It could be putting on a show that helps somebody get over a really shitty day. Actually releasing a record that could be the sound of a new generation. Like, it could be anything, and I don't really care what it is. What I care is the net effect of what we do. Everything that we do, I try really, really hard to make sure that there is some social good outcome. And I'm quite inspired by artist managers who choose to do that as part of their practice. Because frankly, I've got 2 young children now, and if you had told me before we had our first child that she would be born into a world of Trump and just general craziness, Trump, etc., etc., etc. The last 5 years has been a shit show for humanity. More than anything else, and that's discounting ongoing concerns and woes with environment, food security, resources, etc., etc.
Right.
The reality is, we live in a world that could do with a little bit more good. And that's the thing that COVID has done for us, which is given us perspective.
Yeah.
I always tell the artists, keep creating. They say, but no one's gonna say no. Just keep creating. Build up your art health, your creativity health. You work on your mental health. You also need to work on your, be healthy. Just be healthy.
Yeah.
Be safe. Keep creating. So when the world is ready, you are more than ready.
I'm ready. That's so true. No, thank you. Yeah, thank you both. I mean, this is so, you've offered so many insights. And again, I think this is why we have these conversations. And I hope everyone can walk away with a little bit of different insights. And, for my sort of final thoughts is to encourage both the artists and the managers to be ready, to be mentally ready, not just physically ready with your crafts and your skill sets, but to be ready to have honest conversations also with each other. To really to think that, I keep saying we're in the creative industry. We got to think creatively to get out of this. So you don't have to be stuck in your ways of a working model. I think the conclusion is that we don't know what the new model could be. But you've offered, I think you've both offered some insights already of what has been happening in your parts of the world. And maybe maybe you guys as audience watching this can take away some of that and say, oh, why haven't I thought of this? Oh, why have I not thought about talking to my artist about this? Oh, why haven't I as an artist tried doing this? So thank you both so much. And we've been asking, like all our guests at the end of our conversation, because it's not easily to really travel international waters, but if you could, where would you want to go?
I've never thought about that.
I know you said at the beginning you were a little itchy. So where would you want to go?
I'm itchy, but I'm also comfortable in my little bubble. That's why I kind of understand Jana where she's coming from. I'm a little bit afraid the bubble will burst, and then how am I going to face the world? But then, of course, I'm eager to face the world. Wherever I can go, I will go.
Okay, so no specific destination.
Well,
okay.
I want to go to Hong Kong because I have friends who are there, and I very good friends there, and
That's good.
yeah, and then we are planning some trips. I was told to go to the States because now I can go to the States, right? Because I'm vaccinated. Yeah. So I'm tempted.
That's a very difficult question, Cindy.
Yeah.
And I think my response would be different if I considered what purpose that travel would be for. But if I'm being 100% honest, the one place that I would really love to be or go to at the moment is back to Malaysia, because my father has been there since the start of lockdown. We've not seen him since. You know, obviously we see him FaceTime and etc. You know, we've just welcomed the second child to the family. Yeah, he's literally 2.5 weeks old, and my dad still hasn't met him. You know, so for me, for all those reasons and more, like I would want to go home, see my father, but also the rest of my family, and to make sure that everyone's safe and healthy and well. But you know, if it was for work, probably either Japan or India.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, quite different, but yeah, I don't know. But those two places are kind of top of my mind at the moment.
Very nice.
Just wanted to add just one last little thing. You know, at the start of this conversation, we talked about sort of the relationship between artists and management, and hopefully we've had some really good discussions around it. Relating to readiness, I would like to suggest that artists also take the time to really understand or consider this concept of manageability. You know, me as an artist manager, that has become quite important, you know, because it is about readiness, and that readiness is not just about, you know, going out there into the world, but it's also readiness in working with management. You know, are you actually manageable?
That's really true.
I like that very, very much.
I know.
I like that. Because it also sums up what we talked about the last, 60 minutes more or less. And thank you also from my side. Thank you so much. I mean, I made a lot of notes, so I'm taking a lot out of this conversation for me and for my life and for my professional life, both actually, life and professional life. So thank you so much. And I would travel. I still want to travel to New York City because Cindy is there, and I miss me. I don't know. I would travel to New York City. I might say something different next time because I might be more into a summer holiday kind of thingy. But now I'm totally
surprise yourself. Surprise yourself when you are ready to travel. That's the surprise yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, everyone, today. It was such a fabulous conversation. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. And we will see you very soon for episode 7. So thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.